Hello, and a very warm welcome to this, a short introduction to inclusion in the workplace. My name is Richard Elliott, and it's my pleasure to take you through the session. This short training video is provided by AKG in partnership with BASE, the British Association for Supported Employment, and it's funded by Buckinghamshire Council, and it's free for employers to access. It's part of a wider webinar training series, which will also cover inclusive recruitment, reasonable adjustments in the workplace, neurodiversity, and how to create a culture of inclusion. And if you would like more information on these upcoming webinars, please do check out the AKG website and their social media channels. Over the next 15, 20, 25 minutes or so, we will be looking at the following. We'll be looking at what is inclusion, the core concepts and the definitions that surround it. We'll be looking at the benefits because, spoiler alert, it's not just the right thing to do. No session on inclusion would be complete without a brief look at the legal overview, the legislative landscape that we're working within. Then we're going to look briefly at creating safe and supportive workplaces and how to equip organisations with inclusive strategies. And finally, we'll be looking at some of the local and national support that's available to you. My name is Richard Elliott, and I represent two organisations. The first is BASE, which is the British Association for Supported Employment. And that's a trade association which represents its members, hundreds of agencies, employers and individuals that operate within the supported employment sector. We aim to raise awareness of supported employment and represent the sector on a collective basis, informing both its members and government, and encourage best practice. Inclusive trading is the training and trading arm of BASE. It's a leading not-for-profit provider of workforce training and development solutions which promote inclusive recruitment. And we have over 15 years experience of delivering training and consultancy across this sector. Moving on. You're probably aware of inclusion, and you will have heard about inclusion in the workplace. But there are a number of terms that are often used and they interlock with each other. But we hear the terms diversity, inclusion, equity and belonging. Well, the definitions are: diversity is the presence of difference, including different backgrounds, identities, experiences, perspectives, etc. Inclusion is about creating an environment when all of these diverse people feel valued, respected, supported, and together and able to participate fully. Equity is about ensuring fair treatment, fair access and fair opportunities by recognising that individuals have differing needs. And finally, belonging is that feeling of acceptance and connection where individuals feel safe and they feel valued and able to be their authentic selves at work. I think there's a famous quote by a leading diversity inclusion expert, a lady called Verna Myers, who says, "Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance." And I think that sums it up really beautifully. We take it a stage further and we look at the employment context. It's a really nice graphic here that shows that equality is the assumption that every individual benefits from the same support. And that's equal treatment. Equity, however, recognises that individuals need different support, and equity is ensuring that everybody gets the support they need. Liberation removes the barriers entirely. And that togetherness and participation that I spoke about on the previous slide, that is inclusion. And in the employment context, inclusion is about creating a workplace culture where everybody feels valued, respected, supported, and safe. Safe to be their authentic selves, regardless of their background or identity. It goes beyond having just a diverse workforce, which is the mix of the people, to ensuring that everybody has an equal opportunity to contribute. It would be remiss of us to look at inclusion without understanding a concept known as intersectionality. And intersectionality is a framework for understanding how different aspects of a person's identity, such as their race or their gender or their class, overlap to create unique experiences of either privilege or discrimination. It was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw back in 1989 to explain black women's specific struggles. Understanding it as an employer helps us to avoid this one-size-fits-all approach that can unintentionally alienate and exclude people. And considering intersectionality helps us as employers create more effective and inclusive policies. The key aspect of intersectionality is that everybody holds multiple identities. You could be a female, you could be a Latino, a disabled, a Muslim, and they're not experienced in isolation. And every individual has a unique experience, and their combination of the identities create distinct forms of discrimination. For example, a black woman might face sexism as a woman, racism as a black person, and a unique form, a combination of the two at the intersection of both sex and race. And it will be different to what a white woman or a black man would experience. So it's important for us as employers to really recognize and embrace this understanding so that we don't create one-size-fits-all approaches. So what? So why does inclusion matter? I mentioned at the beginning, spoiler alert, it's not just the right thing to do. Having an inclusive workforce brings genuine business benefits and genuine competitive advantages. It boosts innovation and creativity. Different perspectives lead to more creative solutions and better outcomes, better problem solving. If you put a load of people like me in a room, pale, male and stale, we'll come up with the same ideas because we've had similar upbringing, similar background, similar schooling. The more diversity, the more difference you can introduce in the workplace, the better solutions you will get, the better creativity, the better innovation. Studies have shown that diverse workforce leads to more increased engagement and satisfaction. When employees feel heard and respected, they're more connected to their work. And CIPD studies have shown that an engaged workforce is up to 4 times more productive than a disengaged workforce. What does that look like in your organisation? It improves talent attraction and retention. Individuals, particularly early career individuals, are now looking at the social aspects of work and what are employers doing to further environmental, social, etc. So if your organisation is not known for being diverse, you will be missing out on potentially superb talent. It's been shown as well that an inclusive workplace, people are more likely to stay. So your retention stats go up, meaning less money is spent on replacing your talent. It enhances performance and productivity. I mentioned earlier, engaged workforce equals higher productivity, 4 times more productivity. It fosters this concept of psychological safety. And psychological safety allows individuals to take risks, to ask questions, to not be judged, to not have that stigma or the challenge of judgment hanging over them. So if you're able to create that psychologically safe workspace, employees are more likely to be able to bring their authentic selves, and all of these other benefits will come into play. It reduces bias and conflict. Less conflict in the workplace leads to increased engagement. It helps to mitigate against bullying, harassment and discrimination. We'll cover those in a bit more detail in a couple of slides' time. And promotes fairness and respect. It strengthens the company reputation. It shows the customers, your customers and the public, that you value fairness and diversity. And that could give you that competitive edge. Despite all of the benefits, the well-known, well-documented benefits of inclusion, there remains a number of common barriers. A lack of time and capacity, particularly for smaller organisations, and it can make inclusion feel like it's an added pressure rather than part of their everyday practice. They might not understand. There may be a limited confidence or limited understanding. When you look at inclusion, it can be overwhelming. And that could lead to inaction, not wanting to do anything for fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. Inconsistent leadership commitment. We see this an awful lot, where inclusion is driven from the top, usually because maybe one or two or three of the leaders have lived experience. Then inclusion is embedded. But when you have inconsistent leadership, that can be a significant barrier. We all have biases. We all make assumptions about individuals. And this can influence our recruitment, progression, our workload allocation, and our performance management without us really realizing it or recognizing it. So if we understand that we all have unconscious bias and we all make assumptions, that recognition is the first step to enable employers to do something about that. Policies that exist on paper but not in practice. Procedures could therefore be unclear, inconsistently applied, or not understood at all by your employees. This can lead to bad feeling if individuals are being treated differently and can lead to an exclusive workplace culture. Employee voice is a fundamental driver of employee engagement, the ability to speak up in a safe and a confident way, the ability to raise concerns without fear of retribution. If there's a lack of meaningful employee voice within your organisation, if people are scared to speak up, that's a significant barrier to inclusion. Insufficient or poorly used data. If you don't use data to help in your decision making, that can make it really difficult for you to identify patterns, understand impact, or target appropriate action proportionately. And finally, this understanding of the workplace culture that prioritises sameness. If we recruit and we hire and we promote in our own image, that's a significant barrier. But that's safe to us. When we interview people and we give them the job to people we like, not necessarily the people who can do the job the best. So workplace cultures that prioritise sameness. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. As I mentioned earlier, no session on inclusion would be complete without just a quick reference to the legislative landscape, because that provides the context within which we all operate. There are a plethora of acts and rules and regulations that govern inclusion. And you'll be delighted to know we're not going to go through all of these, but we are going to look at the Equality Act 2010. Now, the Equality Act 2010 outlined 9 protected characteristics. And there they are: age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. It defined a number of unlawful behaviours: direct discrimination, treating someone less favourably because of a protected characteristic; indirect discrimination, applying a PCP, a provision, criteria or practice which, whilst applied equally, adversely impacts a group of individuals that share a protected characteristic; harassment, unwanted conduct relating to a protected characteristics that creates an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment; victimisation, which is treating somebody less favourably because they've asserted a statutory right. That could be raising a grievance, could be taking family-friendly leave. Discrimination by association is discriminating against somebody for their association with somebody that holds a protected characteristic. So be careful if you have people who have caring responsibilities for disabled people. Discrimination by perception, treating someone less favourably because you think or you perceive them to have a protected characteristic, which they may not have. And finally, discrimination arising from treating someone less favourably because of a reason that has arisen from their disability. So, for example, somebody with dyslexia or dyspraxia that makes a number of errors in their work, and you take action against them without making any reasonable adjustments, which is the next section. The Equality Act imposes a duty on employers to make reasonable adjustments. We'll explore this in a little bit of detail a bit later. And finally, the Equality Act allows, but does not mandate, the use of positive action, which is taking positive steps to redress imbalances in your workplace. It does not go as far as positive discrimination, which remains unlawful. So that's the law. We're now going to look at how to create safe and supportive workplaces. Very, very high level. Build that psychological safety. This is the concept that I mentioned earlier on about the ability for a team, a shared belief within a team that they have the ability to speak up, to ask questions, to admit mistakes, to challenge the status quo without fear of being embarrassed or rejected or punished. It fosters an environment where individuals feel respected and accepted, allowing them to be authentic, to learn, to innovate, and to contribute fully. Set clear expectations for behaviour. What does respectful conduct look like? And how will unacceptable behaviour be addressed? And most importantly, apply those expectations consistently. Leaders and managers have a specific part to play in inclusion. As employees, we all have a part to play through something called allyship and advocating for individuals. But leaders and managers have a specific role. Their actions, their everyday actions, their language, their decisions strongly influence the culture. Employees look to managers for a lead on how to behave, how to act, how to speak. Create clear and accessible processes. Embed inclusion into those. Make sure that they are accessible and that staff know how and where to go looking for them. Encourage that open and respectful communication. Using plain language, listening, regular check-ins. Support those confident, compassionate conversations. Equip your managers to handle sensitive discussions. And focus on solutions. Constantly have that feedback loop. Regularly review policies and practice. And respond appropriately to individual needs. And quite often, we do that by the use of reasonable adjustments. Workplace adjustment, changes, they can be called many things. I use the term reasonable adjustments because that is what's contained in Section 20 of the Equality Act 2010. And adjustments are changes that employers make to reduce or remove a disadvantage relating to someone's disability. But adjustments don't just benefit people with disabilities. Accessibility benefits everyone, and you don't have to be disabled to benefit from an accessible and an inclusive workplace. These changes could include making changes to the actual workplace, to the physical environment. It could be changing someone's working patterns, working arrangements, finding different ways for them to do tasks, or providing specialist equipment, services, or support. It covers job applicants as well as employees, and it's important to note that adjustments are specific to the individual. Just because you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. They don't all have the same needs. So specific to the individual. And what's reasonable depends on each situation. And as an employer, you must carefully consider if the adjustment will actually remove or reduce the disadvantage. Is it practical? Is it affordable? Or could the adjustment proposed harm the health and safety of others. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the what. Let's now have a quick look at the how. Lead by example. If you're a leader and a manager in your organisation, lead by example every day. Model those inclusive behaviours through your language, your actions and your decisions. Get into a learning mindset. Get comfortable asking. Don't just assume. If in doubt, ask. Embed inclusion as part of your normal management practice. That inclusion by design is fundamental. Otherwise, it's like adding the ingredients to a cake after you've baked it. Makes no sense. Be consistent, be transparent in your decisions. Employees look to that. Am I being treated fairly and in line with other people? Challenge bias. When you see it, challenge it. Build that psychologically safe environment so that you can challenge bias. Create a space. Actively invite feedback and ideas, especially from the quieter voices. And show that the input is taken seriously by acting on it where possible. Respond early and constructively. Unlike a fine wine, issues do not get better with age. So respond to them early, address concerns when they're raised. Don't let them escalate. Don't let them fester. Use flexibility as a tool, not as an exception. Try and have it as the norm, not as something that somebody has to ask for. Use that data. I mentioned earlier on about data-driven decisions. Use it properly and proportionately. Keep learning and seeking support. That learning mindset. Leaders and managers shape culture. They influence behaviours and they set the standard for inclusion through everyday decisions and actions. Finally, guys, you're not alone. There are a plethora of information, and I've popped a few up on the screen here. Do feel free to have a look at it. There is loads of information out there. And keep an eye out, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, keep an eye out for these follow-up sessions that we'll be running over the next few months or so. All that remains to be said is a huge thank you from me. Thank you for taking the time to listen. And I wish you all the very best for the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Thank you.